You have to start believing in yourself, because if you don't, then you start looking for validation. You start looking for an external solution for an internal problem, and that validation will never come. Nobody's ever going to be proud of you until you're proud of yourself. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Elite 360 podcast. I am your host, Anthony Waite, and it's so good to be with you for another episode as we talk about life, leadership, and leaving a legacy, one that you will one day be proud of. Today, what I want to do is a Q&A. I have spoken to audiences all over the country, and one of my biggest audiences, and one that really where my heart is the opportunity to speak to new accessions coming into the military. So this is the young generation, the next generation, who will one day take my position as I get ready to retire from the military. And every Friday, I had the opportunity to go and speak to the new accessions. These are kids that are coming right out of boot camp, and they're beginning their Navy career as a hospital corpsman. As many of you know from listening to me over the years, I once was a hospital corpsman, and I had the privilege of serving with the Marine Corps, serving at hospitals around the country, and ultimately getting commissioned as a Navy nurse and continuing my profession as a healthcare professional. Now, as a lieutenant commander, getting ready to retire after 23 years, it's really an honor for my career to come full circle and be able to teach and speak to those kids that are sitting in the seats that I once sat in, and to give them a little bit of wisdom, a bit of knowledge from what I have learned over the last 23 years. And so what I do is I usually share about 30, 45 minutes of lessons learned, failures, struggles, success, and kind of give them some nuggets on how they could win at this thing called the military. It's a very scary thing as you join the military, especially when there's a lot of unknown. And for me, I wish that I could have had somebody, a mentor, who can sit down and share their knowledge as they get ready to enter into the next chapter of their life, and as I began mine, joining the ranks of the military. And so that's kind of what I did over the last 3 years. And I have, hundreds, if not thousands, of these little note cards. And I asked them 2 questions after I'm done talking. The first question is, if you and I were sitting down having a cup of coffee, just mentor to mentee, Anthony to, HN, so-and-so, knowing what you know now about me and my career and the struggles, the success, the failures, the ups and downs, what would you want to ask me? And this question is important because it gives them direct access to me, but they're able to write it down on a note card and not have to raise their hand and share their biggest fear or their biggest concern or their biggest question in front of hundreds of other peers. The next question is, if there was one obstacle that's going to keep you from being successful in this organization right now, what would it be? What do you believe is the biggest obstacle? And that question is also powerful because it gives them an opportunity to express their biggest fear, their biggest obstacle, what they believe could prevent them from being successful in the ranks of the military. I've shared my story many a times, and unfortunately, not everybody joins the ranks of the military and become successful as a result. I see many of people who will do 5, 10, 15, 20 years and get out and unfortunately have nothing to show for it. They get out and they're the same person because they change the external, but they have not changed the internal. And so that question is really important because I think what holds people back, especially in an organization or in a career and charting a new path, is not the physical, it's the mental, it's the internal change that has to happen. And until we become aware of the obstacles that are stopping us internally, we never have that true transformation externally. And so that's the second question that I asked them. And today what I want to do is I want to share with you some questions that were asked. I won't say any names because obviously there's no names on here. I tell them to keep it private. I pull 4 questions. I haven't written anything down. I have the questions here in front of me, and I want to answer them candid, real talk, no rank, and how I would answer these if I was mentoring those people. And what I found is that, if 1 or 2 people have a question, chances are there's hundreds, if not thousands of others that have the same question. So if you're listening to this, tune in to the questions and ask yourself, is this something that's stopping me? Is this a question that I would ask? And if you're listening and maybe, you are in the military and you're trying to figure it out, hopefully these questions will serve you as we get ready to round the week out. As you're listening to this, it's Friday, the end of the week, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of motivation to say, okay, I may not have it figured out yet, but I'm in progression and I'm progressing through. And this will help you kind of get a different look on things, because when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at begin to change. And so let's get to it. Question number 1, how do you get through the day-to-day grind and preparing yourself mentally for the days that suck? This is a great question, because when you look at the day-to-day grind, everybody's grind is different. You know, when I was at E1, E2, E3, the grind was doing the crappy work, doing the things that nobody wanted to do, getting told to do the stupid stuff. You know, hey, go clean up this, or hey, go do that. Hey, you get in line. Hey, you follow directions. Now, as an officer and a leader, who's somebody who's in charge of people, I'm able to have the day-to-day grind and the suck be meetings and decisions that I have to make that are going to impact hundreds, if not thousands of people. And that's a grind in itself. And that's a day that's, you know, mentally is exhausting, because you have to take your experience and your education and then take feedback from people and make an informative decision that's not just about me, it's going to affect those around me. And that's a big responsibility that a lot of leaders need to understand. When you think about getting through the day-to-day grind and preparing yourself mentally for the days that suck, understand this, that everybody has those days. Nobody's immune to the bad days. Nobody's immune to the suck. But how do you prepare for these? Well, how I prepare for these and how I would tell you to prepare for the days that suck is how you perform in times of calm will determine how you play in times of chaos. And what does that mean? It's easy to go through the day when everything's going your way. It's easy to enjoy the day when everything falls in place, when everything is supposed to be as it is. But that's not always the case. And so how I would say prepare for this is to always challenge yourself every single day. If you're having a good day, great. Just understand that it won't last. If you're having a bad day, understand that those too shall pass. But how you prepare for this is by challenging yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally every single day, because you're preparing in times of calm so that you can play in times of chaos, how you're going to perform. So prepare in times of calm to perform in times of chaos. One way to do this is to challenge yourself. That's why, I go to the gym every single day, even when I'm tired, even when I know that I probably should take a break, even when I know that I don't feel like going. I'll go for a run. I'll go to the gym and lift heavy weights, push myself physically, because eventually when the physical breaks down, the mental gets stronger. Challenging yourself, reading books, constantly feeding your mind with leadership and development, business ideas and ways to think. One of the books that I really love is anything by John Maxwell, but one lately is the Daily Stoic. And what it does is it gives these philosophies from Marcus Aurelius and all the Stoics from past times, and it gives you a different way of thinking. It helps you kind of become grounded in reality and the way that things are. You see, when we live in a fantasy land in this highlight reel and we see things in a flawed perspective, then we have flawed expectation. But when you see things for what they are, you can't fight against truth. You can't fight against reality. And most people waste their energy fighting against what's real because they want to see it differently. They want it to be a different way. And the truth is you can't fight against reality. So your first job is to define reality. Where am I right now? Why does my life suck? Why do these days that challenge me, why are they so hard? Well, ultimately, it's a belief that life should be easy. And here's what I found. Life is never meant to be easy. And in fact, if you choose the path of least resistance, you're going to be met with adversity and it's going to kick you in the butt. And so challenging yourself every single day, even on the good days, even in the times of calm, that's where you get ahead. And what you're doing is by going to the gym and working out, by reading the books, by putting yourself in situations that are challenging you, making hard decisions, making tough choices, keeping the promises that you make to yourself, what you're doing is you're getting a vote for who you're becoming. When you shy away from that stuff, remember the enemy always gets a vote. And that enemy is winning that day because, I decided to sit on the couch and watch Netflix when I know I should have been running. I decided to eat that ice cream when I know that I should be focusing on my health and consuming things that serve me instead of stopping me. Never expect for an easy day and for smooth sailing, right? Smooth sailing never made for a skilled sailor. And there's truth to that. And so how you challenge yourself in days of calm will determine how you're prepared to practice or perform in times of chaos. That mental training, that mental fortitude comes by how you challenge yourself, but ultimately how you keep the promises that you make to yourself, so that when those hard days come, you are confident, you are competent, and you are consistent in carrying out your core values, in carrying out what you believe, and building the virtues, the habits that are serving you instead of stopping you. That's how you prepare mentally for the days that suck, because they will come. Remember, nobody's immune to the problems. Everybody has them. But how you see the problems as possibilities will determine how you get through them and who you become ultimately as you get over them. The next question, I would ask you to give me examples and steps on how to become the best corpsman possible. Now, for those who don't know what the hospital corpsman is or does, hospital corpsmen are the Navy medics. We are deployed with the Marine Corps because we are the Marines' healthcare system. We deploy on ships, we work in hospitals, we work in clinics, and I've had the opportunity over the last 23 years to do all of those. There were some great times and there were some really bad times. But what made me a great hospital corpsman was putting myself in the position to learn as much as possible. And what that requires is that you have a beginner's mindset. No matter how much you know, no matter how good you think you are, there's always something to be learned. And one thing I would do is when there was a surgery, when there was a casualty, when there was a big case that's happening in the OR, I would ask, hey, could I sit in on that and just watch and see how you operate or how you do things? And what that did was it exposed me to new ways of thinking. It exposed me to new diseases and complications with health. It helped me see people that didn't make it through a code. And so I got to witness people, take their last breath. And so now, as a healthcare professional and somebody who's a leader, there's no surprises. I've seen it before. And one of our biggest fears is the fear of the unknown. And so how do you overcome those fears and become the best hospital corpsman possible? Is you overcome those fears by being exposed to the things that you're afraid of. It's not fun taking a patient, doing CPR, doing everything you can, all the medicine, all the machines, all the pumps, and they still don't make it. You feel helpless. You feel like you failed. But the more and more you're exposed to it, you realize that this is part of the process of learning and growing as a person and as a human being. And so you have to be able to put yourself in those positions, take those duty stations that nobody wants, that are hard. It wasn't easy going with the Marine Corps. In fact, when I got orders to go with the Marines in Okinawa, Japan, I actually had orders to Hawaii, and I was going to go be stationed in Hawaii, and I was so excited. And I called my family and said, man, I'm going to Hawaii. I can't wait for y'all to come visit. And the next day I got a phone call and said, hey, guess what? Your orders have been canceled. You're now going with the Marine Corps to Okinawa, Japan. And I thought, oh my goodness, man, it went from Hawaii to now with the Marines in Okinawa. Not only that, but I got to go to a training that's, Fleet Marine Force training. And I got to learn Marine Corps stuff and do medicine on top of that. And it was difficult. It was challenging because at that time we're in the middle of a war. But what it did was it gave me a new perspective. It gave me new training. It gave me an opportunity to learn and to grow. It pushed me out of my comfort zone. And as a result, I got to build the confidence and the competence that ultimately fortified my character as a healthcare professional. That ultimately led to me being selected as a critical care and trauma nurse and doing that for a few years. And that in itself was challenging, but I was able to go and now see another side of medicine and be that person who was able to take my training to the next level. Couple that with a bunch of deployments and going to different places and providing healthcare all around the world. Now it gave me a perspective that 99% of healthcare professionals don't have. And that's one of the beautiful things about the military is that when you take those opportunities, they might seem like obstacles, but the opportunity is worth the cost. The opportunity is worth the challenge. And on the other side of that challenge is where you fortify your character, your confidence, and your capabilities. And now looking back after 23 years, I'm so grateful for those times that felt like the worst days possible. It felt horrible, where I felt helpless, because now I realize, man, I learned so much, and as a result of learning, I was able to grow. So keep a learner's mindset, keep a beginner's mindset, always be learning and always be growing. If you don't grow and you don't learn, then you can't lead. And so how to be a best hospital corpsman is to be a better learner. Soak in that information, because there's always going to be somebody there who might know more than you, but that are willing to teach you. So surround yourself with those people who are the best in the business. I've been around some of the best surgeons in the world, and I got to learn from some of the best, and that set the foundation for me to be a great nurse, a great hospital corpsman, and now a great leader. And so for you, don't be afraid to take those opportunities. I see a lot of people today, they shy away from the obstacles. They shy shy away from the challenges. And there's a good book by Ryan Holiday called The Obstacle is the Way. And Benjamin Franklin has a quote that says, those things that hurt us instruct. And so all those difficult things that you go through are teaching us a lesson. And that lesson will one day become knowledge that we use in our own life. We learn it, we live it, and then we lead it. So always be learning so that you can start leading, because eventually you'll be that person who is leading the next generation. You'll be teaching the next generation. You'll be sharing those situations. You'll be sharing that knowledge. But if you don't learn, you don't have the knowledge, you're going to be sharing theory instead of real life experiences. So always be learning and always be growing. The next question, how did your journey with your faith change or help you? For a long time, I would tell people, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And what I was saying is that I believe in something bigger than myself. I just don't fall in line with organized religion. I couldn't get down with the physical church and how people really took it to the extreme. As I grew in my faith, I realized that there's a lot of things that we are capable of doing as human beings, but then there's another level to what we can actually do and what we can actually accomplish in life. And that takes a level of faith. That takes a level of believing in the unknown and really challenging ourselves to where we have God-sized goals that stretch us out of our comfort zone and our current level of knowing. And so my faith was really fortified when I was in nursing school. I applied to 3 universities, one of which was a Seventh-day Adventist university, which I was selected. I went to school. And in that school, we had to take religion classes. We had to take chapel. We had to learn about God. We had to learn about the Bible. We had to learn about the faith and healing and how that fit in with our medicine and our nursing training. And I was able to deploy to Haiti in 2013 after the earthquakes ravaged the country. And we went out there. We provided medical support, but the most important healing aspect of that was praying with the people, being present with the people. Your presence is very warming and healing for a lot of people. And as a nurse, sometimes the best medicine was just being able to sit at the bedside with people as they took their last breath, sitting with the family members and helping them overcome the reality that their family member is going to pass. But that takes a level of faith. In one instance, I had a lady who was 93 years old. She wasn't going to make it out of the hospital. She was too fragile to go to surgery. So they came up with the conclusion that she was going to take her last breath in the hospital. Well, I had the opportunity to be her nurse for those last few days of her life. And on that last day, when she started to decline, I noticed that her heart rate was slowly declining. And I called the doctor and I said, hey, I don't think she's going to make it much longer. And so we called the family. They came into the room and they were saying their goodbyes. And I told them, I said, hey, if you need anything, please let me know. And I walked out of the room and I went to the nurse's station and I watched her on the heart monitor on the telemetry unit. And I started seeing her vital signs decreasing. And I knew that she was going to be taking her last breath very, very soon. And as I started watching her heart rate drop 80, 70, 60, 50, the door flew open and it was one of the family members. And they said, Lieutenant J.G. Waite, could you come in and could you pray with us? And in that moment, I really have never prayed for anybody. I really only used prayer when, I needed help from God and my life was in a bad place. And I just, I prayed that things would get better. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll come pray with you. And as I walked in the room, they were all surrounding her bed and they were holding hands. And so I joined in with them and I held their hands and I said a prayer. And as I finished the prayer, they all one by one went around the bed and they were telling her, thank you. Thank you for the life that you lived. Thank you for taking care of us and giving us an opportunity. Thank you for being a great mother. Thank you for just everything you've done for us. You can go now. It's okay. And as she took her last breath, I heard, the teardrops hitting the floor. It was such a deafening silence that you can hear the teardrops hitting the floor. And when we got done and she passed, they gave me a hug and they said, thank you so much. We really appreciate everything you did for our mom. And when I walked out of the room, I had this conviction inside of me that, reminded me that I'll be laying in that bed one day too. You will be laying in that bed one day too. What are they going to say about you? What is your family members going to say? Because I've also been on the side of the fence where I had to make the call to the next of kin and let them know that their family member was not going to make it. And I remember calling the daughter of this man that was going to be passing very soon. He wasn't going to make it. And when I called her, I said, your dad's going to be passing soon. Do you guys want to come and say your goodbyes? And she said, well, I haven't talked to him in years. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to make it. And he laid in that bed and he took his last breath all by himself. And I thought to myself, here's two sides of the coin. One, this lady surrounded by her family, surrounded by loved ones, who lived a life of purpose and selflessness and of service, who has all of her children and all of her grandchildren around the bedside telling her thank you. And on the other side of the coin is this man who maybe led a selfish life. He was so disconnected from his family that nobody showed up to say their goodbyes. And I realized that, man, I got to start living my life more like her. I have to start living my life with purpose and intent. I got to make amends with the people that I, love, and the people that I lead, and the things, even though there might have been people that wronged me, I got to learn how to forgive. But you see, forgiveness takes a level of faith. It's not letting go of the what they did. It's letting go of the hope that things could have been different. And that requires faith. And so that point on in 2015, it really solidified my faith that I got to start doing things differently. I got to start being different. I got to change who I am and how I see things and how I see people if I'm going to add value to people. Most importantly, I got to see value in myself and forgive myself for the things that I've done. Nobody's perfect. And I think when we find our faith, we find a level of grace that we have for ourselves and that we extend to other people. Remember, you can't give what you do not have. And when we look at our life, we have to look at our mental, our physical, our spiritual, our emotional, our relational areas of life and ask ourselves, how have I been operating? How am I treating myself, and how am I treating those I lead and those I love? But without faith, it's very hard to do. One of the things that I've done over the last few years to grow in my faith was surround myself with people who are a little bit further on this journey than I am. And what I did was I started a men's leadership devotional on Saturday mornings. And what started as an idea to grow in my own faith and inviting people who are grounded in faith, who are a little bit older than me, who are a little bit further in life than me, has more lessons to teach than I do, it turned into a few years now. We've been going every Saturday at 7 a.m. And if you want to join that, you're more than welcome to shoot me a message and I'll give you the link to join us. But every Saturday morning we meet at 7 a.m., a group of men who are living intentionally, who are grounded in faith, who believe in God. And we talk about the Bible, we talk about biblical principles and how they apply to our life. How do we use that to lead and be who we're called to be? And that helped me grow in my faith over the last 3 years now. And as I grew in my faith, what I found is that more opportunities come my way. I'm being able to speak on stages and not just share leadership, but share how God's changed my life and changed my heart, and how my faith has grown and how it's allowed me to lead at a different level. I was invited to a church recently and share my testimony with the pastor of a church here in San Antonio. I would have never got that opportunity had I not grown in my faith and had conviction and how my life has changed. There's a lot of things in our life, if you were to go back and reflect, there's a lot of things that we can't explain, that we just think are luck or chance or, happenstance. And what I found is those aren't by accident. All those things in our life that happen, good or bad, those are divine interventions. Those are lessons that we are given, and those are tests that become our testimony. But if we don't learn the lesson, life continues to give us a test. But if you grow in your faith and you understand that life doesn't happen to me, it happens for me, then you're able to look at it just as it is, as a lesson to be learned so that you can live it, you can learn it, and then you can lead it. And so growing in your faith not only helps you as a person, it helps you in your professional life and your personal life. Remember, your mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and relational areas of life, they're all intertwined. And if one's suffering, the rest of them are going to take a hit. So growing in your faith is huge. And growing in my faith has allowed me to lead at a different level, personally and professionally. So I will tell you that, one thing that I can tell you that changed and transformed my life is growing in my faith. I'm not saying you have to go to church every Sunday. I'm not saying you got to go preach and spread the gospel. But what I'm saying is that you got to start finding something bigger than yourself. You got to believe in something bigger than yourself, because at the end of this life, we're all going to have to answer for how we lived. And the worst thing that you can do is live a selfish life and not become the person that you were called to be. Ed Milet, who's a motivational speaker, and he has a couple of great books, but he says, one of my biggest fears is getting to the end of this life and standing at the gates and meeting the person that I was supposed to be, and that person being a stranger, not knowing who that person is. And I think this journey and this thing called life is really about finding and becoming the person that we're called to be, so that when that time comes and we meet that self, that person that we're supposed to become, they're a familiar friend. They're not a stranger. And so growing in your faith requires you to set on this journey to grow internally just as much as you grow externally. The last question that I was asked that I'll share is, how did you keep your head up after people told you to quit? One of the most powerful things that you can do is channel that negative energy, that negative self-talk, that those people that counted you out, that maybe said, you're never going to be something, you're never going to be anything, you're never going to amount to anything. For me, it was, you're just like your father. And many of you know my dad is a drug addict who lives on the streets. I haven't talked to him in years. Last time I talked to him, I forgave him for the way that he was and made amends with who he's chosen to be. But I've been told throughout my life many a times, who do you think you are? How are you going to do that? People like you don't make it this far in life. You're never going to have a chance. You might as well quit. You might as well give up. You might as well not even try. And what I've done is I went from letting that define me to allowing it to refine me. And what I've done is taken that negative energy and kept it inside and used it as fuel to say, I'm going to prove them wrong. Many people spend their life proving people right by doing the exact same things that they told them that they were going to do. When I was told, you're just like your father, it wasn't long that I, believing that and being told enough, we believe it, that I started acting in accordance with that. I too, became homeless, living on a friend's couch, bouncing from house to house and trying to figure out where I was going to get my next meal at the age of 17. That ultimately led to me joining the Navy. And once I realized that my belief drives my behavior, and if I'm going to change who I am, it can't be external. I got to change the internal, and I have to change that belief. But how do we change belief? Well, we have to build proof. And so without building proof, you're never going to change your belief. And that proof is by proving them wrong, by taking what they said and saying, I'm going to show them. I'm going to become something. I'm going to become somebody. And you put your head down, your nose to the grind, and you work on becoming the person that they said you couldn't be. You become the person that you're called to be. And this is a powerful way to get going, but it's not a good way to stay. And I'll get to that in just a second. But what happens is, as you flip the switch, and now instead of being, timid and meek, you become confident in who you are. You build clarity on who you need to become. And although the current situation or circumstance sucks and you don't have proof, this is who I need to be. This is how they act. This is how they would be. This is what they would do. You start aligning your core values with that future self. And now you set a standard for yourself and you hold yourself accountable by keeping the promises that you make to yourself. You set a standard. You define reality and say, man, you know what? Maybe I do suck. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't have what it takes yet, but that doesn't mean I got to stay there. Your past doesn't define you. It's not a destination. It's made to refine you. And all the obstacles, all the adversity, all the naysayers are fuel to keep you moving. And one of the biggest fears that I had, in my life was not the deployments, not the situations where I found myself feeling helpless. It was going back to where I came from. Going back to that place where I felt so alone, so afraid, so helpless. I looked at my situation and thought, man, they're right. I am a nobody. I am gaining speed and going nowhere really fast. And I realized that, man, I have to start making a change. And that change has to happen within before I can see it outside of me. And so for you, when people tell you you should quit, use it as fuel. Don't let it knock you down. Let it build you up. Let it light the fire inside of you that says, you know what, when you're running that mile and you're going for 10 miles and you're at mile number 8 and you're tired, remember what they said? Remember that person who said you can't do this? Use that and say, you know what, screw that. I'm going to show them, and I'm not going to run 10, I'm going to run 11 miles. I'm going to push myself out of my comfort zone. And in the process, I'm going to create the person that I'm called to be. Nobody's coming to save you. And the work's not going to do itself, as my friend Jonathan Swindle would say. You have to start believing in yourself, because if you don't, then you start looking for validation, and that validation will never come. Nobody's ever going to be proud of you until you're proud of yourself. Nobody's ever going to believe in you until you believe in yourself. I had so many people when I started doing good. I knew you were going to become somebody. I believed in you. I knew you were going to do it. But the problem is that I didn't believe in myself, and I didn't have faith in myself that I was going to be able to do it. So everything people told me how good I was and how good I was becoming, it fell on deaf ears, because internally I didn't believe that. It wasn't truth for me because there was no proof. And so I kept building and climbing and building and climbing. I started to seeing results, and that proof started changing my belief, and my belief changed my behavior. And as you get to that next level, you have to understand that it doesn't stop there. It's a continuous evolution and refining to becoming the person that you're called to be. And in 2019, I got back from a deployment, and I got a phone call from my superintendent of my high school that I barely graduated from. I had a 1.8 GPA, and I wasn't the person that people would bet on to be somebody, to do something with themselves. And when I got the phone call, I was like, oh boy, my mind automatically went back to that negative belief. I thought to myself, what did I do wrong? They must have found something out. Maybe I didn't graduate. Maybe, I screwed up. Maybe there's something that I missed, and now I'm going to have to pay the price. And when I picked up the phone, they said, Mr. Waite, congratulations. You've been selected as a distinguished alumni for your graduating class. Myself and one other person. 2 people out of my whole graduating class, and I was one of them. And what that meant is that they were watching me. They were following me, and they were seeing this evolution from this broken, lost kid who barely graduated to now somebody who's traveling the world, saving lives, taking care of patients, working with the president, climbing the ranks in the military, living a life of service, servant leadership. They saw this transformation, and they found me worthy of becoming a distinguished alumni. That led to them flying my family and I out to Houston to speak at NASA. I got to go to my high school, the same hallways where I used to get into fights. I used to, get told that, you're a loser, you're never going to be anything, get out of my classroom. I got to walk those same halls and then speak to all the students in the high school. It was like 700, 800 kids. I got to speak and get on stage and share with them my journey from broken to now becoming somebody. And then they took my picture and they hung it up on the wall, and it's still there today. And now that school is humongous. They have thousands of students that go through there every single day, and my picture is on the wall, class of 2003 distinguished alumni, on the same wall as Gene Kranz. Gene Kranz was the mission commander for Apollo 13. Like, how cool is that? Somebody like me who came from nothing, became something, and now is being recognized with some people who done amazing things in this world. That guy has a school named after him, and my picture is right next to him as a distinguished alumni. And then on top of that, I got to go and be the keynote speaker for the Education Foundation, and I got to get on stage in front of the same teachers that were, that taught me, that saw me as this troubled kid, who failed me in classes, who kicked me out of their classes. Now I'm on stage sharing with them my journey and how I became this person that I am today. And that was all because I didn't listen to those people who told me you should quit, you should give up, you're never going to be anything, you're never going to amount to anything. And so that transformation can happen in your life, but you have to take that negative energy, all the naysayers, and you got to use it as fuel to push forward instead of letting it define you and becoming a failure. Don't prove them right, instead prove them wrong. Use it as a fire inside of you that's going to continue to push, continue to grow, and continue to lead by example. It's not easy, but it's necessary. And there wasn't, a bunch of good days strung together. It was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of failures, a lot of heartache, a lot of stress, a lot of struggle. But in the end, you will come out victorious. If you keep that inside of you that says, you know what? I'm never going to quit. Quitting is not an option. There is no plan B. This is where I'm going. This is who I need to become. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get there. One of the biggest things is keeping the promises that you make to yourself. And one day you will see that transformation, and that becomes that aha moment that says, you know what? I'm not the same person. And as I said before, that biggest fear for me was going back to the same place that I came from, going back to where I came from, the same person that I once was. In this moment, I got to go back to where I came from, a changed man. And I got to prove it to all the people that told me that I should quit. So stay the course. Stay confident. build your character and stay consistent. And you too can change the person and show people that what they said holds no weight in your life, that you're not the same person that you once were. And once you build that proof, that changes your belief, and that belief will change your behavior. I hope this episode served you. I hope you got a lot out of this Q&A. I like doing these. If you have any questions or comments that you want to leave, comment below and let me know, and I'll answer them on the next Q&A episode. If you want to join the Built Not Born School community, there's a link below. Join us as we talk about leadership, we talk about life, and we talk about building a legacy. It's free right now. You can join, and I have a lot of workbooks. I have a lot of frameworks that I share that I've used in my own life. I use with my coaching clients and the people that I speak to, and all the leadership training that I conduct. If you want to get those and access to those, join the school community, and I'll see you inside. I'll see you on the next episode.